Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cinema A to B. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 1995 comedy Tommy Boy. But we want to say thank you to Scott for recommending this or asking us to do this because it is definitely one of my favorite comedies of all time. I know, Ben, it's up there for you as well. And Scott, I know we've had conversations about it. So let's going to dive right in. And Ben, what are your thoughts? You saw it sooner than I have, so.
Yeah, and sooner is probably a stretch, but it's soon enough. And I seem to watch this at least maybe once every year and a half. Mm-hmm. Although lately it seems to have gotten less TV play.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know who the rights holders are. Anyway, I digress. This is I'm thinking this is my favorite comedy of the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly up there. I've not made a ranking of comedies in a long time, but it's high. This is high. And so this is my peak 90s comedy. It sits right in the middle of the decade, which is kind of convenient. Mm-hmm. And then I don't think it's really an argument that this is the best thing that Chris Farley ever did.
100%. Yeah.
And sadly, we just didn't get the man very long. Here today, gone tomorrow. And but he left us gems like this.
Yeah, he did. He really wanted to live Belushi's life, unfortunately, and just kind of mimic so much. And unfortunately, that included leaving us early. So very frustrated, but very sad to lose him because I love this. This is probably my favorite comedy of all time. Like in top 10, if I had to pick, or even my top 5, if I had to throw in a comedy with my top 5, this is probably in it because out of all the movies, I think I quote this movie the most. Like it's either the most or it's the next most. Like I'm always throwing stuff out, even if nobody knows it, because now a lot of people don't know it. But you're just like, "Would you do Richard?" Or just there's so many great lines in this. And honestly, for a comedy, it's also really well done, really tight. Like there's not a whole lot of fat on it, and there's not a lot of jokes that either don't land or feel forced. It just kind of feels like, Chris Farley and David Spade just, hey, we're going to put you in this situation, and the two of you just kind of come up with it and just kind of figure it out as you go along. So it's definitely, in my opinion, the best comedy to be produced by Lorne Michaels. So anything that's come out of SNL, like hands down. I know like there's a bunch of like decent ones that come out, but for me, this is my favorite. So I think it's the most well-produced and the most that doesn't have just its normal shtick. Like I love Wayne's World. I do, but
yeah. But this is so unique, right? Because this there's no SNL bit that this is based on. It's its own thing exclusively. I mean, you had sketches with Spade and Farley, a bunch of them, but never playing these two characters. No,
there's a lot of little bits of pieces of other characters they've played on SNL that kind of, became this. But they also, if I remember correctly, they shared an office at SNL because they were still both working SNL. And so like they would have to fly back and forth from shooting this and then, going back to do SNL. So there's a lot of probably in jokes that they have that were like, you know what, we're just going to have to put this in the movie, that they had in office that they enjoyed. And I think it really works. Like they were really smart about it.
It's just it's so darn effortlessly funny. Even Farley is kind of in a lot of ways dialed back, especially compared to a movie like Beverly Hills Ninja, which I love too.
Yeah,
and I do. It's nowhere near this, but he's trying so much harder with the physical comedy in something like Beverly Hills Ninja versus Tommy Boy. So in a lot of ways, he feels a little more dialed in, but he's not 100% of the comedy.
No,
I mean he's most of it, but the supporting cast, including Spade, who is obviously his perfect counterpoint. Mm-hmm. But go down through the cast, and it's just like what and obviously Dan Aykroyd kind of plays a character he's played before, but it's great as Zelensky.
But when you bring Dan Aykroyd and he's not the funniest character, or he's not even like supposed to be that funny. I mean, he's funny, obviously, but like you've kind of pushed him back like that. I just don't get it how it can be so good when you don't play your strengths of Dan Aykroyd being Dan Aykroyd. But I have to say, like, I agree with you, Chris Farley. It almost feels like Chris Farley's playing this as straight as he possibly can. Like, he's not going to his comedic strengths that he had in SNL. You know, you have little bits when it's like the fat guy in the little coat kind of moments or whatever, where he kind of gets that bigger. But overall, it's almost like he's just playing the kind of dumber son of this company just trying to make it. And
he's playing a real person. We've all seen this character before. Mm-hmm. You see this character at least once a week in your real life. I guarantee it. Mm-hmm. The offspring of some highly successful business owner that works in the business, that's an absolute moron. Like, we've seen it. The
nice thing is, though, that the redeeming quality is that Chris Farley's character doesn't have an overindulgence of his self-worth. And he just kind of is overall just a nice guy who doesn't think he's better than what he actually is. I mean, like, obviously he admits in the movie that I am not my father kind of a situation. Like, my father could do this, I can't. But
right. And so there's a humanity to Tommy.
Which in real life, you don't get that.
He was coddled, but he's not particularly spoiled in a lot of ways. Like, yeah. The character isn't. It's really interesting because, yeah, when you see this real person, the people I'm talking about, they're usually pretty spoiled and they kind of know it. And yeah, this we've seen pieces of this person, but there is a humanity to him. The other thing is he actually has a legitimate character arc. Mm-hmm. Tommy is not the same guy at the end of the movie that he was at the beginning. And it's taken for granted in comedies. And this reminds me, kind of goes back to our discussion about Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Alan Ruck's character, Cameron, that has a really nice arc. Tommy's arc is just as good. Mm-hmm. It's different, but it's really, really good how much he changes and evolves. But it still kind of fits the classic Hollywood, like, everything's okay. He saves the business. He gets the girl. Mm-hmm. So it's that old formula that it feels like works. Movies now are just afraid to go back to. Yeah. It's like they're almost afraid to dip back into that well. This is a really feel-good movie. With a lot of great lines. And this is my favorite David Spade. I really do like David Spade and how bitey he is, but this is, I think, the best. I mean, I know they tried to recreate it in Black Sheep, and it felt far more forced than this did. This really felt like ease of them working together and having kind of work this out and not trying to push in the jokes, just let the jokes kind of happen. And it just worked. So Laura actually hates David Spade. And so she really doesn't like this movie too much. Not so much the movie, just she can't stand David Spade. So it's really hard for her to watch this. So even though this is, I think, at his least biting, least spadiness, of what he's done. Yeah. The problem is, and I've got no problem with somebody not liking David Spade. I mean, I've got my actors that I don't particularly care for, and I'm not a huge fan of his, but the more I've read about him, the more kind of an appreciation I have for him, mainly because of all these amazing characters that he wrote on SNL, mm-hmm. hoping that he would be the one to deliver them. And unfortunately, they kept going to Dana Carvey. And yep. I can't even imagine how frustrating that had to been. I mean, the church lady, that's a Spade character. And that just was a common kind of shtick. And by the way, there doesn't seem to be any angst anymore between them, because I've seen Carvey on Spade's show recently, and they get along fine. And it was discussed, but it was ultimately a decision made by Lorne Michaels. Yeah. So it's cool that Spade got a role like this and eventually kind of burst through the glass ceiling, I guess, with his filmmaking, and kind of achieved a level of success in movies that he unfortunately never got on SNL, because he never really could get past playing a secondary character on the show. And I have to think, with his writing background, that I know he's not a credited writer on Tommy Boy, but I'm telling you, there's got to be, I'm confident that there's entire sequences in here that he and Chris dreamed up, or he himself came up with. And he's great in this. Oh, he's great. Just
Just the interplay.
Is that a niner in there?
What are you calling from, a walkie-talkie? I love this movie. Like, just thinking about it, I'm just kind of like the same thing. I just smile on my face, laughing at all the stuff. And again, but even taken away from the comedy, it's still a story told well. Like, they don't try to put, the story's not secondary. The story is kind of the purpose of it, that they just fit the jokes in, or they fit that comedy into it. You know, and it's a mix of physical comedy, of obviously David Spade's very kind of more, not cerebral is not the right word, but it's all words and not so much that physicality that Chris Farley has. But I mean, they just do, you know, like the opening sequence, I remember it's like him as a kid. But then he runs through the trees or whatever, and then gets chased by the dog and misses the bus. And like the, you know, of course, David Spade's, you know, not alter ego, but his young self drives by like, late again. You know, and then it's the bus and the smoke. And then it transitions to him in college, missing the bus to take his exam. And like, that is a great transition. Like, to show this character is this way as a child, he's still this way in college. It kind of automatically, you know, connects us to this person of like, okay, I can see the background of why he is who he is. Right.
So like, let's break this down, because if somebody's listening and thinking to themselves, why can't more comedies be this good? Well, let's do a breakdown, because the script is really good, like really good. And there's good structure here, as far as the beginning, a good defined beginning, middle, and an end. The hero's journey is totally at play here, because he does have like the refusal of the call when his dad, Big Tom, dies, and he's going to have, you know, he initially kind of rejects that. And so the script's good. There's plenty of places for them to improvise, which I think is key when you make a comedy. Like, don't put every single joke, have it scripted. Like, why are you hiring good comedic actors if you're just going to make them read verbatim script jokes? That's silly. And I'm confident that wasn't the case here. And then every other technical detail on this movie, it's shot well. The edit is hella good.
Yeah.
You know why? Because you don't notice it. You don't watch this and go, oh, the editing was tremendous. But I'm telling you, as somebody that edits every day, or just about every day, the editing in this movie is really, really good. Yeah. Really good.
Well, it's the same thing. Like, you go to a concert, you listen to, you know, a band. The only time you think about the sound guy is when things get messed up. You know, you don't walk away from the concert and going, wow, the sound guy just did an amazing job. You go, the band sounded really good. But a lot of that is the sound guy. Like, in this case, a lot of it is the editing, but you don't think about that. You're like, oh, the story was good. You know, it was shot really well, all that stuff. But you don't think, oh, hey, the editor just nailed it out of the park.
Editing comedy is kind of difficult, because you have to pace the jokes properly, but then you have to create that natural breathing room for the audience to actually laugh before you hit them with another joke. And that's easier said than done, on like how long that should be and how to kind of manipulate that in the course of the movie. And this movie does that great. You're not laughing over the next joke,
or laughing
over the next gag,
or even expository stuff that's going to move the story along. Like, they give you that kind of space to laugh. And maybe I do miss the next line, but the next line is not that important, you know? So it's more along the lines of, it does, you know, obviously it does move the story. It is important, but it's not, you're not missing anything major. You can still see the movie and still get it without that.
The antagonists are really, really good in this movie too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Bo Derek's kind of underrated in the role. And then, but Rob Lowe, the thing is, I never had a good understanding of like how talented Rob Lowe really is until I was much, much older. He was just always the jerk in these SNL movies. I mean, he's Benjamin in Wayne's World, and then he's the quote unquote stepson in this. Yes. But he's so good.
He is.
He's so good.
These shoes are worth more than your life.
Yeah. You ever eat paint chips as a kid?
Yeah. Why?
He's a very integral part of this ensemble.
And supposedly he was asked by Lorne Michaels to do this. Like Lorne was just like, he wasn't going to do this movie because he just done Wayne's World and he was still, I think, still doing SNL at the time too. But Lorne was just like, yeah, you should, you need to do this. I've thought, we're doing this movie. You need to fly out. And he was like, all right, Lorne, I'm gonna do this. Yeah.
The only other one that jumps out. Well, there's two people I want to speak to briefly. Brian Dennehy's is just a good actor. And there was, I don't know who it was. It wasn't you, but somebody I knew had just convinced themselves that like Brian Dennehy died in like, I don't know, 2002 or something. Like there were just constant conversations of, oh man, he's dead. And it was like, wait, no. And he did pass away. Just 3 years ago. But yeah, it was kind of a running joke, and I'm trying to remember who this was. In my life at the time, I was just convinced that Brian Dennehy was like not with us.
You thought of me because I had this with John Rhys Davies from, yes. For some reason I thought John Rhys Davies was dead, completely dead. Like after he filmed Lord of the Rings, he passed and would not believe it that he was alive.
The Mandela effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's still kicking. He's still kicking.
Yeah. Like he's still alive, but yet for some reason in my head, he died. He's dead. John Rhys Davies is dead. I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, John.
No, I was thinking about some of the other cast members. This Julie Warner that plays Michelle, that plays kind of his love interest that works at the auto parts store. I really liked her, and she's not had a bad career, but I was thinking to myself, I was like, she was almost born too early, because when this was made, she was in a few films and then kind of was relegated to television. And I was thinking to myself, you know what, if she was coming up now, she'd have gotten her limelight with like 2 or 3 movies, and then she would have been able to continue having a nice career starring in things on like Netflix and the streaming series. And I was just thinking about, this is such a different era where it's like either movies or like just network TV or kind of bottom of the barrel TV. The streaming stuff has opened up such a huge opportunity for actors that just didn't exist in 1995. And she feels like one that would have been able to carve out a little bit different career path had something like a Netflix been around, Yeah. Cause she's not been in like a ton of stuff since. Like she was in Doc Hollywood and Tommy Boy. But after that, it's like, it's mostly television. Yeah. It's just different era. Era, much tougher era as an actor in a lot of ways.
Just not as, not that more movies are made now, but I'm guessing you do have more opportunities because of the streaming services, when not everything has to make a ton of money on the big screen.
Well, and this was an era where like, oh, you do a comedy, this is all you do is comedy.
Yep.
And that's less true now. You've had more and more actors be able to cross over. I mean, people quickly forget that Tom Hanks started his career as purely a comedic actor.
Oh, yeah. The Bosom Buddies. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Splash.
Turner and Hooch. Yeah. It's like he was purely comedy and was one of the few that was able to bust through. That doesn't happen for a lot of folks, but anyways, back on topic with Tommy Boy. It just kills me that 2 years after this, Chris is gone.
Yeah.
It's like his filmography is tiny, and and he still feels larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, jump on IMDb. It's just short. It's just not that many movies. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's a generational thing. I think now, more and more kids are coming up that probably haven't seen some of his stuff.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have that draw. I mean, they may have seen the motivational speaker, one where like, in a van down by the river.
Yeah. YouTube will keep him alive to a certain extent, just the back catalog. But I know we've got some younger listeners that were frankly born like in the year or two after he passed.
Yeah.
And a lot of them I think have seen Tommy Boy and hopefully like Beverly Hills Ninja. But if they haven't, you got to watch these. It's not that many movies. It's not, we're not telling you to watch a guy's filmography that's like 50 films. Like he basically from It was basically just like a 2 or 3 year window in the 90s. And then, yeah, what I mentioned to you off air a couple months back was how much he had recorded of Shrek.
Before they,
like 85% of the Shrek voice work was already in the can before he died. And it was going to be really different. It was no Scottish accent, much more heartfelt. You can find it on YouTube. You can pull up Chris Farley's scene. It's like a sketch animatic. Shrek was drawn differently, tailored to him. And it was a scene with him and Eddie Murphy. And it's a much more, in some ways, is a little more heartfelt performance. On Shrek's a little more of a little darker character. But what could have been, I mean, it's kind of wild. Yeah. So yeah, they had to redo all of that when he passed away. This is his crowning achievement. And frankly, it's a crowning achievement in comedy.
So well made. It's so, and again, it's just a good story to begin with. It's not like, I love, Airplane, movies like that have, really laughed, but Airplane is just one little joke after another, where this is, like you said, it's the hero's journey. It's still a good story. You have, those characters change. You have those characters learn things and become better and work together. And then it's still absolutely hilarious. And now I do have to wonder, you and I think this is hilarious, and obviously we watched it. I'm pretty sure that it's still going to translate. Like, there's not a whole lot of jokes in here that are probably from the time. I think that it still kind of works. It's all very relatable still.
Comedically, it doesn't feel too far removed from what's worked over the last, 20 years. And this movie, frankly, is crazy. This movie's coming up on 30 years.
Yeah.
In 2 years' time, we're going to be talking about 30th anniversary re-release probably of Tommy Boy. But watching a movie like this reminds me that just comedy feels like such an abandoned genre by Hollywood right now. Like, because they don't feel confident that they can get butts and seats into theaters just purely on comedy. The gamble is, we'll have a bunch of jokes in Guardians of the Galaxy and it's more comedic, but it's big, it's expensive, big action sequences. These movies, if they're getting made, they're not getting big theatrical releases.
If at all.
If at all, yeah. And so I think comedic writers are really much more relegated to the streaming stuff and maybe some network television.
Yeah. Well, and just comedy feature films, I think, are not a lot around. Like, usually if it's going to be a comedy, it's going to be a television show or a streaming series.
Yeah.
That you can do 6, 8, 10 episodes of and then move on. You're not going to have that 90-minute, not really 2 hours, but 90 minutes of a comedy that doesn't have something else. Like, I'm trying to think back of streaming movies that have been really comedic. I'm thinking of some of like Ryan Reynolds stuff that has come out on Netflix, but again, those are, sci-fi related or heist related.
Or like Deadpool.
Yeah.
So it's
comedic, but that's not really what it is. Like, it's a superhero movie or it is a heist movie that has comedy in it because of the people you have, but it's not just a straight comedy.
It's a lot of cross genre stuff.
Yeah.
Is where you see comedy now. You don't see it in its pure form in a movie like this. At least I haven't very recently.
I'm trying to think of.
And one of the last ones, I mean, you got to go back to like 08 or 09 for something like Tropic Thunder. And it's even kind of masked as a sort of a quasi action piece too. So yeah, they've kind of figured out they've got to package these things a little bit differently, which is kind of unfortunate to me. I like these more grounded. There's really not anything in this movie that's like unbelievable.
By the way, the deer shot took like weeks to get right, apparently, or something. I don't know if it was weeks, but it was it was multiple days, if not multiple weeks, to actually get that right. And it was, I'm glad they did because it's comedy gold. It's fantastic. But
it makes me think genre wise, this has got to be one of the best road trip movies ever made. This, along with the original, National Lampoon Vacation movie.
Yeah.
And that's another one that, don't get very many of anymore. They seem to come in spurts. The road trip film, and road trip films are typically like cheaper to make.
And again, like you said, it's shot really well, edited really well. I mean, and by that, I mean, you don't really think about it. You're not getting these beautiful, amazing shots like you would from some of these sci-fi movies that are out there, or some of these, Marvel films where you're like, oh my goodness, it's a gorgeous shot. But again, you're not going, oh, that's kind of crappy. They shot on location a bunch. You didn't have that many probably soundstage shots. So
when they're calling on those mechanics and stuff, those all feel legit. And yeah, they shot on location in Sandusky, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And then they shot up in Canada, Ontario, Canada. Yeah, that's crazy. They shot from September 12th to December 9th, 1994.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Which for comedy, it's a pretty decent amount of time, actually. But it's cool they shot on Sandusky, on the Go Bucks, by the way. And we just lost like the one person listening from Michigan, I'm sure. But no, it does. It feels authentic. It doesn't feel like a studio set picture at all.
Kind of
and
like
it's 1995. It's shot on 35 millimeter film. It's beautiful. It looks the way a movie should.
Mm.
So are we effectively saying that comedies peaked in the 90s?
I'm okay with that. I mean, you've got some stuff, but I think it changed. Obviously, how we view movies has changed. What we expect from comedies have changed. But the world also drastically changed in the 2000s. The things got darker, or I need more than just this, quote unquote popcorn flick. I need something.
I'm telling you, 2001.
Yeah.
2001 pivoted. The world got a whole lot more serious. And I think we've been kind of reeling ever since on trying to, man, I tell you, I think we'd be a lot better off if we could just get a little less serious now and again. But I'm not gonna preach on that. I do love that the director of this, and we were talking about this before we started recording, Peter Segal. I do love that he directed Naked Gun 33 and a third. Like it just, and it's funny because it was the year before, and comedically there's not a ton in common, but it helps to just know what makes people laugh. Like what makes a good laugh. And yeah, Naked Gun, I love those movies, but yeah, those are what you refer to. That's just joke on joke on joke on joke.
With a little bit of story to kind of keep things moving.
Very little paper thin plot to keep things kind of churning forward. But those movies know what they are. And I miss those movies too.
Yeah.
Airplane, Naked Gun, like where, I wish those would make a comeback too.
Yeah.
But first I'd love to see something like Tommy Boy.
So racking my brain, the only ones I can kind of think that would be as close to a regular comedy is something like Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead, where
Yes.
But again, they kind of trap themselves in other things to kind of get the comedy around. But it's the closest thing to, I guess, Tommy Boy that I can really think of in this regard. So, but again, it's a little bit more over the top with the story, over top with what we're at. It's bigger than just, hey, I'm saving my dad's, brake company or muffler company. We forget what it was.
Brakes.
To begin with. Brakes, yeah.
Yeah.
I still laugh that Roger Ebert hated this movie. So that's that. I mean, not that I care, but no offense, Roger, but but it did get panned, even though it's my favorite.
People just talk themselves into needing to have some sort of elitist mentality to judge comedy. Like it feels like that genre is just never appreciated.
No, and sorry, keep going.
No, I think you can pick up exactly what I'm throwing down here.
As an actor, I can tell you, comedy is so much harder than drama, but yet we always give best actor to someone who did drama. And you could talk to other actors, maybe they feel differently, but the actors I've talked to, comedy, especially like broad-based comedy of what like Tommy Boy is, or something where you can get a whole host of people laughing, is so difficult. The timing, the pacing, like all that stuff is so much more work than just feeling sad or being tears. Obviously that does take work. Like that is still, we talked like, I think Dune, last week or whatever, or the last time we talked about Dune, like getting that energy out of kind of that scream, that fight, those fight scenes of like, that takes a lot of energy too, but it takes a lot of kind of creativity and ability to kind of control yourself to not rush jokes or not to force jokes and just kind of let them come. And honestly, it makes me upset every single time that there's not a comedy actor, voted best actor, get the Academy Award. Never.
It was the Golden Globes that had them separated, right?
Yeah.
But then now the Globes are a mess because of the foreign press. So
yeah,
with the way that all blew up, maybe they need to add another category at some point. I
mean, I could see it separated, but I'd also like it's still acting. Why do we have this idea that dramatic acting is so much better and so much harder, and they're the ones get? I mean, yeah, it's a serious topic, and a lot of times it makes us think, and this makes us laugh, which automatically kind of makes us push it away. But it takes just as much work, if not even more work, to do comedy than it does to do drama. But I digress. That's my thoughts on it.
No, I completely agree.
It's so much harder to write comedy.
It's harder to write. It's underappreciated. I mean, this is one of the best comedies that I've ever seen, and it's only like a 7.1 on IMDb. And a lot of that is we all have such different ideas and tastes sometimes with what is funny and what is not. But this is a funny movie. I mean, this is one of the funniest movies that you're likely to see. And I think we can wrap this up. Yeah. Appreciate everybody catching us as we discussed Tommy Boy Revisited. Thanks again to Scott for the recommendation. Yeah. If you want us to talk about a movie that you love, go ahead and recommend it. We take in recommendations always. Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it's movies we haven't seen before, And you can kind of follow the podcast, the goings-ons on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Yeah. And we will catch you on another episode of Cinema A to B. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, everybody.